I have a question for you. Are you ready to lose unwanted weight and keep it off forever? If the answer is yes, you are in the right place. Here's what most people think it takes to lose weight. Before I go on, my name is JT Tapias. I'm a professional fitness life coach with the Empty Your Bucket Nutrition Plan. And for the last 23 years, I have obsessed about weight loss sustainability. When I say obsessed, I mean that I have really just dug into the science, the psychology, and the dynamics of weight loss. Most people tackle weight loss from a dynamic standpoint, meaning that they count macros, they count calories, they count points, they go to some place where they give them a meal plan, they journal, maybe they encounter a coach that gives them a ton of facts and tells them why they need to lose weight, and they scare the living lights out of them because they tell them all the reasons why if they don't lose weight, they're gonna be unhealthy, they're gonna get a heart attack, they're gonna get type 2 diabetes, and they basically give them all the facts. Well, the truth, and in my experience, is that the dynamics are important, right? The dynamics, the macro counting, calorie counting, point counting, even though I truly believe in the long term, those strategies are not successful. I do believe that they get people started sometimes and they bring a little bit of acknowledgement and they bring awareness around food and portions, and all those things are very positive. But ultimately, I know these strategies fail. The whole meal plan thing, I think, is a way to basically give people a ton of restrictions. In other words, here are all these recipes, and then, if you follow these recipes, you'll stay on the diet. But then if you don't have the recipes and you don't have the guidelines and you haven't actually trained yourself to understand the macronutrients that you should be eating and the portions you should be eating, all of a sudden things fall apart and people regain the weight. And that is super, super frustrating. There is a book that I absolutely love, and if you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to go get it. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I love everything James Clear has to say, but I'm going to slightly disagree with him on one thing. He says that in order for you to form a habit, right? He says that you have to make it obvious, meaning it has to be visual. You have to make it attractive, meaning that, it's something that you truly, truly like. He says that you have to make it easy. And I agree with these things, but these are dynamics. He also says that the way that you get triggered and tempted is that you get cued in by something, you see something, right? It triggers you. That develops a craving. You start to romanticize the time you ate the ice cream, the time you had the piece of cake, the time you had the donut, and that creates a craving. It impacts your emotion, and based on that emotion, you respond by possibly eating the donut or eating the ice cream or eating the thing that you shouldn't eat. And then that triggers a dopamine release, right? Anytime that you do something pleasurable, you secrete dopamine. Anytime that dopamine is secreted, you get hooked to that particular thing. There's an emotional anchor that attaches to that particular thing. So now you understand why you are so addicted to these kinds of foods. It's not that you're flawed. It's not that you're big boned. It's not that you're from the Midwest and this is why you're not losing weight. It's simply because it's a reaction to that cue, to that craving. You respond in a certain way, and then there's that reward mechanism. And that continues to happen over and over and over and over again. So then the question is, okay, JT, well, that sounds depressing. Like what is the actual solution to this? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I truly believe that the solution to the actual challenge is in the mindset, in your mind, in your cognitive process, right? The way you become very aware of the challenges that you have. In other words, you start to make some distinctions around the things that are challenging you. And so, yes, you can definitely make things invisible. You can make things unattractive. You can make them difficult. You can make them unsatisfying. But until you actually find a strong emotional why that impacts you at an emotional level and moves you away from the things that you're trying not to do, aka the bad food that, quote unquote, you always sort of fall into, or you often fall into. Until you find a strong emotional why that pushes you away from that particular thing, you're going to continue to repeat this pattern over and over and over. This is a heavy example, but this happens with alcoholics, drug addicts, people that are addicted to cigarettes. they get into this perpetual cycle and they can't understand why they can't break that cycle. Overeaters, right, or emotional eaters do exactly the same thing. Your brain is triggered by the same exact circuits that all of those vices that I just mentioned are triggered by. So it's the same thing that triggers the desire for cigarettes or alcohol or drugs. This is the same exact trigger that you're getting from food, and sometimes even more powerful, because I often say that food is the invisible drug. It's something that society accepts as something normal. Most people will justify it and say, well, I have to eat, right? I have to survive. And this is how they justify eating and maybe being a little overweight. You hear people making jokes all the time. Ha ha ha, I don't have a six pack, I have a keg. You know, these are all jokes that are very acceptable and are funny, but you don't see people joking around and saying, I'm addicted to drugs, or ha ha ha, or I'm addicted to alcohol or cigarettes. People don't joke about those things because from a society standpoint, that's not as acceptable. There's a lot of stigmas around that. But the food part is always the acceptable one, right? And so how do we overcome this? Number one, you need a strong emotional why, something that will move you away from the thing that you're doing. That can be that you have kids and you want to leave a legacy. You want to be congruent with what you're teaching them. You're teaching them morals, principles. You want them to be successful, people in society that are healthy, that are strong, that live a long, healthy life. And so you're trying to impart all of these ideas, but you yourself aren't doing it. And so you get fed up with that and you start to say, I really need to do what I'm actually teaching my kids. And you start to be congruent with your message, and maybe that impacts you and that becomes your strong why. You want to leave a legacy behind. Or maybe you decide that you're going to go get a checkup and you go to the doctor, and all of a sudden your doctor reads your blood work and it's a mess, right? You are right about to fall into type 2 diabetes, or maybe there's hypertension, or maybe you're experiencing palpitations because you're overweight and your doctor's telling you that you need to lose weight, because that's all doctors say is you need to eat less and move more. This is the only thing the medical community says about weight loss, right? And so you get scared. They scare the lights out of you. And now you're like, okay, I have to do something about this, right? And now you're moved because you got a bad doctor's report. And now that becomes your very, very strong why. Once you have that strong why, whatever that is for you, now the dynamics that I talked about initially can work. So we make things very obvious, right? If we want to eat healthy, the saying, out of sight, out of mind, the opposite is true of that. So we create visual cues around the house. We have the right meals around the house. We have our sneakers by the door, so we're always reminded that we want to go out and exercise. We maybe you start buying some equipment for the house. Maybe you have a little space in the house where you can buy a little pull-up tower. Maybe you have a little push-up station, something that will remind you of being physically active. And you basically booby trap the house. So wherever you look, you are constantly reminded of the thing that you are looking to do, making it very obvious, right? You make it attractive, right? Inside of our program, we have amazing recipes, guidelines to guide people into delicious food that makes it very attractive, right? So this is not bland food. We're giving you a ton of different recipes and options and things that you can do inside of the guidelines. So you make it attractive. You make it easy. One of the things that we often talk about is that you always want to have food on deck. So meal prepping is pivotal to your success, so that when you open the fridge, the first thing you see is the thing that you should be eating. So we make it very easy, right? Always having food on deck. And lastly, my friend, you want to get yourself a coach, right? A third unbiased party that is not your friend, is not a family member, and that you've actually paid. You've made an investment, because we believe that when you pay attention. If you get these things in order, primarily, you find the why. You then follow the dynamics. You make it obvious, you make it attractive, you make it easy, and you follow up with getting a coach that consistently understands all of these patterns that I just talked about, and he holds you accountable to that every other day, like we do inside of our program, then my friend, you are bound to make some incredible distinctions and start to head in the right direction and change this situation that has plagued you for so long once and for all. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you enjoyed that video, I know you're absolutely gonna love this video here. My name is JT Tapias with the Empty Your Bucket Nutrition Plan. I'll talk to you guys soon. Ciao, ciao.